Welcome back. Still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salalo Makudira. The time is 10 minutes past 9 Central African time, and we're going to be turning our attention in the second hour of the show to Sri Lanka, a country still grappling with legacies of a decade-long ethnic conflict. There's a new documentary titled Neelan Unsilenced, and it's just been released, marking the 26th death anniversary of Dr. Neelan Unsilenced, a Harvard-educated constitutional lawyer, scholar, and politician who devoted his life to creating a peaceful and just solution to Sri Lanka's ethnic conflict. Dr. Tirushalvam envisioned bold constitutional reforms, advocating for minority rights and power sharing at a time when political courage came at the highest price. His life was cut short by an assassination, but his vision for Sri Lanka's future continues to resonate. The documentary, directed by Sri Lankan Canadian filmmaker and writer Pitasanna Shanmugathas, not only revisits Dr. Tirushalvam's constitutional proposals, but also highlights his international contributions, including his role in Chile's 1988 plebiscite that helped end Pinochet's dictatorship, and in shaping, I think it was Kazakhstan also, and their constitution after they got independence. The documentary was released, I think, at a very, very critical juncture in Sri Lankan history, with President Anura Kumara and his party holding a historic parliamentary supermajority at the moment. The film raises urgent questions. Will Sri Lanka finally take the steps towards long overdue constitutional reform, or will this rare opportunity be squandered? And to unpack all of this, we're joined now by the director of the documentary himself, Pete Shanmugathas. Pete, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure's all ours. Just first question before we get into it. Why was it so important for you to release Neelan Unsilenced now on Dr. Neelan Tirushalvam's 26th death anniversary? I think the timing of it is rather perfect. And was it a deliberate act from you to do so?
Absolutely. To understand why I released this documentary now, we have to look at Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka's recent history. Sri Lanka underwent a 26-year civil war where the minority Tamil community, predominantly located in the north and east of Sri Lanka, they were subjected to decades-long discriminatory actions by the Sri Lankan government, ethnic pogroms, brutal acts of violence and slaughter. So the Tamil minority community in the north and east of the country, in 1983, they decided to wage a separatist war against the Sri Lankan state for their own independent Tamil nation. And that civil war was a 25-year civil war, which began in 1983 and it ended in 2009. And since the end of that war, where the Tamil rebels were brutally defeated, there has been no constitutional reform that really meaningfully addressed their grievances. So fast forward to the present day, 2025, we now have a political leader in power who ran on a campaign a year prior. He won a presidential elections. He ran on a campaign where he got support from the Tamil minority community in the north and the majority Sinhala community in the south, running on a campaign to bring forward a new constitution for Sri Lanka that would address the grievances of the Tamil minority community and of the other communities on the island, namely to devolve power from the central government to the regions and to give all the regions of Sri Lanka a level of autonomy. So this man named Neelan Unsilenced, who the documentary is about, during the height of the Civil War in 1995, he put forward bold constitutional reform proposals designed
mm,
to bring a peaceful end to the Civil War. And these proposals were unprecedented in their in their attempt to address the grievances of the minority community, the Tamil community. These proposals sought to get rid of Sri Lanka's unitary structure. Sri Lanka's current system of government is a unitary state whereby there's excessive power concentrated at the central government. The central government is controlled overwhelmingly by the Singla ethnic group, the Singla majority ethnic group, who constitute more than 78% of the population on the island. And they overwhelmingly consolidate power at the center. And right now, the way that Sri Lanka's governing structure works is whatever power is devolved to the regions, the central government can unilaterally take away that power. So there's no real power guarantees for those within the various regions of Sri Lanka. There's no real regional autonomy for not only the Tamil minority community, but also the single politicians within the other regions of Sri Lanka as well. So what Neelan's proposals sought to do in 1995, it sought to get rid of the unitary structure of the Sri Lankan state and transform Sri Lanka into a union of regions. And it sought to devolve a significant power to all the regions of Sri Lanka and to put in checks and balances that would prevent the central government from unilaterally taking away those powers that are devolved to the regions. And the proposals were also bold in that they sought to get rid of the executive presidency in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has an executive presidential system whereby authoritarian power is consolidated within one person, the president of the country, and he or she can curb the will of parliament. And so Neelan's proposals also sought to get rid of that. The problem was in 1995 when Neelan advocated those proposals, the government at the time didn't have a 2/3 majority, and also the Tamil rebel group, the LTTE, they were against Neelan's proposals because Neelan's proposals sought to resolve Sri Lanka's ethnic conflict under a united Sri Lanka, and the Tamil rebels, they wanted a separate state. So because of that, they ended up killing Neelan Unsilenced for advocating these proposals to peacefully resolve the Civil War, which by 1995 had killed tens and thousands of Tamils as well as Sinhalese people as well. So now fast forward to 2025, we have a new president that has come into the country with a super majority, which means more than a 2/3 majority in parliament, which means that he can bring forward constitutional reform and he can implement a new constitution for Sri Lanka. And he ran on a campaign to abolish the executive presidency, to devolve power to the regions, to give the regions a greater level of autonomy. So his promises very much mirror the promises that were in Neelan's proposals, for which he was killed. So by releasing this documentary now, I wanted to inform and educate the Sri Lankan people about who Neelan was, the flaws of Sri Lanka's current unitary structure, as well as the key features of Neelan's proposals, which the Sri Lankan people need to pressure the Sri Lankan president to implement in his new constitution. The problem in Sri Lanka right now is the Sri Lankan president, despite having won a supermajority over a year ago in the parliamentary elections in Sri Lanka, he has not made any move in terms of constitutional reform. So by releasing this documentary, making it available for free for Sri Lankan people all over the world, I want to educate the Sri Lankan people so that they can pressure the Sri Lankan President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, to get moving on constitutional reform and to implement the just and inclusive constitution which Neelan had envisioned.
No, most definitely, and I think you painted such a wonderful, background for the documentary and the history of Dr. Neelan. Just the title itself, Neelan Unsilenced. Why did you choose to go this route? Because I think it's a very loud loud headline for this documentary, a very loud title for it. Why did you go for it specifically, and just how much of Neelan's constitutional vision still remains vital for Sri Lanka today? I know you touched on it a bit, but I think it's important that you expand a bit on it.
So the reason why I decided to call the documentary Neelan Unsilenced is because when Neelan Thiruchelvam was alive, and he was a member of parliament in Sri Lanka, a renowned constitutional lawyer, scholar. He was respected all over the world. In fact, when he was assassinated by the Tamil rebel group, the LTTE, even figures like Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, the Bill Clinton, the president of the United States, issued a public statement condemning Neelan's killing, given that he was such a consensus leader, a peace figure. So during the time that Neelan was alive and he put forward these proposals to resolve the ethnic conflict peacefully, they were the boldest proposals ever put forward to date in 1995, when he put forward the proposals to address the grievances of the minority communities. And when Neelan put forward these proposals, since Neelan was a Sri Lankan Tamil himself, because he did not support the views of the Tamil rebel group for a separate state, the Tamil rebel group and supporters of the Tamil rebel group in Sri Lanka, as well as in the diaspora, deeply vilified Neelan and portrayed him as being a traitor to the Tamil people. And they sought to silence his legacy when he was killed. And for years and years, he was killed in July 29, 1999. And for years and years, I felt that Neelan's legacy had been largely forgotten, especially in the diaspora. And it had been silenced. Neelan's legacy had been silenced, I felt. So by releasing this documentary, it seeks to unsilence Neelan, because you hear his voice. You hear his voice championing for the need for an inclusive and just constitution, championing for the people to value the sanctity of life, how precious every single life is, and that we should not resort to war. You hear him say this in his own words. So that the reason why this documentary is called Unsilenced is because it seeks to highlight his voice, to showcase his legacy, and to bring him back into the forefront at a time where we need his voice and vision in Sri Lanka, but also all around the world. Neelan was not just a figure solely central to Sri Lanka, but he did democracy promotion in places like South Africa, democratic election monitoring in Chile, in Bangladesh, in all around the global South. He was a firm proponent and advocate of democracy as being the foundation through which all sort of progressive reforms can emerge that can protect the rights of minorities, can ensure an inclusive society where people of all ethnic, religious groups can live and coexist with economic rights and political rights. And so, this seeks to resonate with all people around the world that are fighting for rights and are seeking having their rights protected. And with going to the second part of your question, Neelan's proposals are very much relevant to the present day. Still, Sri Lanka's current political structure is a unitary state. That has not changed since Neelan was killed and since during the time that he was alive. Sri Lanka's current political governing structure consolidates power at the center, and whatever powers is devolved by the unitary state to the regions, that power can be taken away unilaterally by the central government. So Neelan's proposals, which sought to put in checks and balances that would prevent the central government from unilaterally taking away powers given to the regions, Neelan's proposals did away with something called the concurrent list, whereby there's joint powers currently within Sri Lanka's governing systems. There's joint shared powers between the central government and the regions, but
Mm,
really the way that the power sharing mechanism is written, whatever powers the central government proclaims to share with the regions, it can unilaterally take away those powers. And so Neelan's proposal sought to do away with the concurrent list, abolish it, and it sought to explicitly list the powers within the central government and the regions, and also to have checks and balances so that for instance, the governor appointed by the central government is directly held accountable to the chief minister, has to have concurrence among the chief ministers. The chief minister has to have concurrence among the local government. So in every area, there's like checks and balances. And Neelan's proposal is also sought to have a negotiation mechanism whereby anytime there are disputes between the regions and the central government with respect to power sharing issues, there was a devolution mechanism whereby the political leaders within all the regions would get together
mm,
and would try to form agreements with the central government and try to resolve disputes amicably. It would be kind of like a dispute negotiation mechanism. And so those are still vital principles. And Neelan's proposal sought to abolish the executive presidency, which still exists in Sri Lanka, whereby there is authoritarian power being held by the Sri Lanka has a president and a prime ministerial system. So you have an executive president who has authoritarian power that he can curb the interests of the majority in parliament and act in a very authoritarian manner. That still is a system within Sri Lanka that exists. So Neelan's proposal sought to do away with that. So in those respects, and the fact that Neelan's proposal sought to completely get rid of this notion of Sri Lanka being this unitary state and think of Sri Lanka as a union of regions,
mm,
very much sharing constitutional scholarship from India, which views itself as a union of regions. Those are principles that are very much relevant to Sri Lanka, the current the grievances of Sri Lankan people, Tamils, as well as Sinhalese. We have to bear in mind that the way that Sri Lanka's governing system operates, whereby power is consolidated at the center, that system is also unpopular among Sinhala political leaders within the various regions of Sri Lanka at the provincial level, because those Sinhala leaders don't have any real autonomy to govern, because whatever powers the central government devolves to the regions for the Sinhala leaders, that central government can take away unilaterally, essentially. And so the current political structure of Sri Lanka is unpopular among both Tamils and Sinhalese. So in that regard, you have a bipartisan consensus for the need for constitutional reform, despite the fact that the grievances among the communities they differ in some respects.
mm, mm, mm. And I think, as I'm listening to you speak, it's almost because you always try and draw parallels between your own country and another country, and this time around being Sri Lanka, and Neelan almost sounds to me as Sri Lanka's answer to a Nelson Mandela, one of our foremost leading statesmen. There's so many similarities in his approaches and some of the suggestions that he's made to Nelson Mandela. I want to move on to, I think, a very, very important aspect of your documentary. You emphasize the fact that Sri Lanka is at a political crossroads of some sort. You mentioned the NPP, the current political party that is in government right now, holding an extraordinary kind of supermajority in parliament. Yet, you note that meaningful constitutional reform has been absent. Why do you think this opportunity is being missed? What could be the core reason why what we can consider as being such an obvious thing, looking at the resources that are at disposal, but not ultimately enforcing what would seem like the perfect answer to some of Sri Lanka's main core challenges?
In Sri Lanka right now, I think, despite the fact that President Anura Kumara Dissanayake has a supermajority, his political coalition, the National People's Power, they won an overwhelming majority in the parliamentary elections last year, whereby significant support among the Tamil minority community in the north, as well as a singular majority in the south, all voted for him. And this the president, he belongs to a party that has never been the governing party of Sri Lanka. So in order to understand why the president is not prioritizing constitutional reform, we have to kind of step back a bit, a few years prior, to looking at 2022 in Sri Lanka. In 2022, Sri Lanka's economy was in the worst position it had ever been since Sri Lanka's independence from the British in 1948. Sri Lanka's economy was going in free fall. Sri Lanka's economy was going to collapse because there had been decades-long neoliberal policies, and that had kind of caught up to Sri Lanka in 2022, whereby the president at the time, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, through various flawed economic policies, had essentially bankrupted the country, and there were significant protests in the south of the country, which resulted in the president at the time, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, being chased out of the country. And the Sri Lankan people at the time were tired of the two-party system in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka for decades was governing between the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and the United National Party, whereby these were two singular majoritarian parties that would consistently come into power one election after the other, but there would be no meaningful change for the Sri Lankan people. They would promise constitutional reform, they would promise better economic policies for Sri Lankans, but Sri Lankans consistently never saw any meaningful change, especially the Tamil minority community, who were subjected to brutal violence at the hands of these two majoritarian political parties. So President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, he had belonged to what could be identified as the Sri Lankan Freedom Party coalition, and he was chased out. So the current president's party, the JVP, that party had engaged in significant grassroots activism as a third party in Sri Lanka, as a left-wing party in Sri Lanka, since 2022, after the economy had collapsed. President Dissanayake had really engaged in grassroots organizing among the country, saying that he was a different kind of political leader and that he understood the grievances of the Sinhala people, their economic grievances, the fact that the Sinhala people wanted accountability in terms of corruption and economic mismanagement of the country that had resulted in the economy going in free fall in 2022. President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, during this time, as he hadn't been president, as a politician, he had appealed to the economic grievances of the people. He had appealed to the Tamil minority community, promising to implement constitutional reform that would address their grievances. So when he comes into power last year, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, because of the severe economic mismanagement of the country that had resulted in the country's economy going in free fall, he's prioritizing currently tackling corruption within the country. The fact that there are so many politicians that get kickbacks and that are essentially robbing the Sri Lankan taxpayers of their money being put to good use. So the reason why constitutional reform isn't priority is because the President Dissanayake says that he wants to prioritize tackling corruption, prioritize tackling economic mismanagement of the country. But President Anura Kumar Dissanayake, he has arrested a number of establishment politicians. You may have heard that last week the former president of Sri Lanka, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, was arrested for using government funds for a personal flight that he undertook to the UK. He had misused state funds, so he's been arrested for that. There's been various other political leaders of the traditional two-party system that President Dissanayake has arrested. So this is popular among various segments of the Sinhala community. But the problem with President Dissanayaka's approach, the fact that he's prioritizing tackling corruption and not prioritizing constitutional reform, is that a constitution for a nation is the foundation within which the society governs. So if President Dissanayake is saying that he's going to tackle corruption, he's going to bring economic reforms, but he's doing it under Sri Lanka's current constitution, which is very centralized, which is very majoritarian, because the foundation of Sri Lanka's constitution is so flawed, the very fabric of how the society operates, the constitution so flawed, any sort of reforms that the president can implement will not have long-lasting impact. So if you're going to implement economic reform and tackling corruption under a constitution, a governing fabric of society that is inherently flawed, those reforms that you implement are going to be very temporary, because another president can come into power and he can unilaterally take away those policies that you implemented because of the majoritarian powers that are granted under Sri Lanka's current flawed constitution to the executive president. As a result of that, the president, by prioritizing tackling corruption and economic reform as his main commitment, and ignoring constitutional reform, is really doing his own policies a serious disservice. But he is seeking to, because he has a supermajority, he's so overwhelmingly confident that he can implement constitutional reform within the mandate of his that he's been given as president, that he doesn't have to prioritize that now. But the problem by postponing constitutional reform is that you seek to lose the momentum that you had when he came into office. He had a huge momentum, a huge popularity among vast regions of the country. And given that he's delayed on constitutional reform, if he seeks to bring forward a constitution much later, towards the end of his term, and his economic policies may not have been as successful, he might have opposition even within his own supermajority that may prevent him from getting the 2/3 majority to implement a new constitution, which he would have initially had he come into office. So I think in that respect, the president is making a serious fatal mistake by prioritizing tackling corruption to score political points, and not prioritizing the fundamental important goal of changing the governing structure of the country, through which meaningful reforms on economy and on corruption can be sustaining and long lasting.
No, most definitely. Pete, we're going to leave it here for now. Really, really appreciate it. For people that want to view the documentary, how can they get hold of it? And where can they get hold of it?
So the documentary is available online for free for anybody to watch. It's on the website www.neelanunsilenced.com. That's NEELAN unsilenced.com. And the documentary is free for anybody to watch on that website.
No, there you have it, Pete. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you giving us the time. And I think it's a very, very important and wonderful documentary for people to check out. Very, very educational. But we're going to see video for now. Hope we chat soon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you have it. We're going to take a quick break. I think after that very, very insightful conversation there from Pete, giving us insight into Sri Lankan politics and the dynamics that are at play. But most importantly, the documentary, Neelan Unsilenced, I think is one that you definitely need to take a look at. Very, very educational. And as he was speaking, as I mentioned to him, I saw and drew parallels between Neelan and Mandela. I think the drive and the push for democracy and constitutionalism and dialogue is a theme that comes out very, very strong in both leaders. And yeah, you can check out um, the documentary online, Neelan Unsilenced, I think on YouTube. Give it a shot. I think it's really, really insightful and I think a great watch. And thank you to Pete, filmmaker and writer, coming to us live out of Canada, and giving us the time to reflect on Sri Lanka's past and a challenge to its present. The full documentary, as I mentioned, is available to watch for free online, and yeah. That's going to be where we leave it. Otherwise, coming up next, we'll be shifting our focus now to Pakistan, where devastating floods have forced thousands from their homes. We'll be hearing from Islamic Relief South Africa, who are currently on the ground, about the scale of the humanitarian crisis, and most importantly, how you can get involved. So, more on that after the short break.